Pikmin is one of the most unique and engaging video game series I've ever had the pleasure of playing. As my good friend once said, there is no unbased Pikmin game. Probably because he's never played Hey Pikmin, but that's for another day. There's so much to love about these wonderful games, from the atmosphere to the satisfying gameplay, to the endearing characters, to pretty much everything else about them. And ever since Pikmin 4 finally released and everyone has finally started to play these masterpieces, I've been in a massive Pikmin mood, so I figured I'd get it all out of my system and talk about them. Let's get into the underappreciated gem that is the first Pikmin game. The first thing that sticks out about the original game is the atmosphere. No other game in the series feels quite like this first entry. It's isolated and mysterious. For the only time in the series, I'm unsure how to feel about the Pikmin. By the time we get to the fourth entry and they still want to help out with whatever mission the player character is on, regardless of whether it's Olimar or not, I feel that they can be easily classified as friendly creatures, but in this first game, it doesn't quite convey that idea. Olimar even questions why the Pikmin don't attack him after having seen how they attack larger, scarier creatures like the Bulborb. When the Pikmin 4 Ask the Developer came out, I was surprised to learn that one of the inspirations behind Pikmin was Tim Burton, but playing this game again after getting that context, I can definitely feel it. The world is hostile, but also serene. There are no enemies in this game, just predators. It's all alien and unfamiliar, with danger lurking everywhere, and Olimar has no choice but to venture out to find his ship parts, because otherwise he'll die. Olimar is easily one of Nintendo's best protagonists. He's by far the one who has the most personality. I love Samus, Link, Mario, and the others, but Olimar is fleshed out a ton more, especially in Pikmin 2 with its Piclopedia. He's just an average guy, and I think that it helps make his plight more engaging. You want to see him get his ship parts back, and you want him to be able to reunite with his family. His end-of-day logs are some of my favorite parts of the game. He talks about how much he misses his family, makes observations about the Pikmin, and constantly mentions how he doesn't think he needs all 30 ship parts to leave the planet. And the fact that they bash you over the head with this repeatedly doesn't even bother me that much because it feels realistic. If you were in that situation, you'd probably think that to yourself all the time, because the idea of there being any wiggle room brings a sense of comfort and reduces the stress in such a scary situation. Side note, Olimar is not enslaving the Pikmin or colonizing the planet. Not even Louie would do that, he would just eat them. The Pikmin could turn on him at any moment, or they could just leave him and do whatever else. Every time I hear this, whether as a joke or a serious remark, it makes me want to commit dastardly crimes. The music is also pretty good in this game. It's relaxing and fits the vibe of every area so well. The Forest of Hope is calming, with the backing having a hint of darkness to it. The Forest Navel is a little darker, but it doesn't put you on edge, it mostly just feels mysterious. The Distant Spring is more ethereal and serene, by far my favorite piece of area music in the game. The final trial gives off the same vibes as Clocktown Day 3 from Majora's Mask. A happy tune with a more sinister backing. It gives off the vibe of being the last test for Olimar, as the title would imply. The end of day theme and results music are also iconic and are staples of the series. I always look forward to hearing them when I'm done with the day's tasks. The stop roll is also phenomenal and is by far the best piece of music in the game. For this video, I played the original GameCube version of the game, and I think that it works a lot better on the GameCube than I used to give it credit for. The controls are pretty solid once you get used to them. The C-Stick doesn't move the camera, even though I'm pretty sure that's what the C means in C-Stick. It instead guides the Pikmin around you in a small circle. This allows for the easy swarming of enemies, which, depending on the situation, can be more useful than throwing your Pikmin. Combat in general is pretty fun, especially when you're going up against multiple enemies. While every enemy attacks in different ways, you'll always have to focus on either not getting the Pikmin crushed or not getting them eaten. Every encounter, aside from the bosses which we'll get to, is fun, and for the particularly annoying or tough enemies, it's also quite satisfying. That said, the Pikmin are pretty stupid in this game. The hardest part of returning to this game, especially after 3 and 4, is that the Pikmin AI is not great. It doesn't help that this game predates Pikmin 2's amazing quality of life feature of whistling at the Pikmin who are affected by a hazard, so when these idiots fall you into the water or whatever, it's over as you watch them slowly die. Getting Pikmin to follow you up any slope is one of the most aggravating things I've ever done in my life. I find that I often just throw them up there before doing anything else if possible, because it's just less of a headache. The game is pretty jank all around. Ship parts can get stuck in impossible locations, forcing you to restart. Pikmin can get stuck on bridges. One Pikmin can drink all the nectar by themselves before anyone else can get any. And all sorts of other things that make me grip onto the controller with far too much force. These moments pass though, and it doesn't take away from the incredible gameplay loop. Enemies can be taken back to the Onion to produce more Pikmin, which gives you more of an incentive to fight them besides just getting them out of your way. And you're gonna want as many Pikmin as you can get. since it not only gives you the edge in combat, but it's also necessary to have enough Pikmin to carry the different ship parts. And the game is always under a timer, and a fairly strict one at that, so you can't just meander around. You have to actively come up with a strategy and split your tasks up so that you can get everything done. Later entries get rid of this strict time limit to varying degrees of success, but we'll talk about that when we get there. There are 30 days and 30 ship parts, so as long as you can get at least one a day, you'll be fine. And there's no shame in restarting a day if you lose too many Pikmin or aren't efficient, since the experience you'll have gained will help you on your next attempt. There's nothing quite like trying to find that one stray Pikmin when you're down to the last 10 seconds of the day so you can get them to safety, since every Pikmin death is on your hands. And you absolutely do not want to see them get eaten alive after having been left behind. I think where Pikmin shines the brightest is with its replayability. There's this stat screen showing you how many Pikmin you brought into the world, how many were lost, how many days it took, and all that good stuff. It encourages you to really learn the layouts of the areas, to improve your strategy, to think of how you could lose less Pikmin, and to try getting multiple ship parts in a day. It may not seem possible in a first playthrough, but as you get better, you learn that the game can be beaten in under 10 days. You learn how to better engage in combat, to maximize damage and minimize Pikmin lost. 1, 3, and I presume 4, though I don't really know yet since I've only done one playthrough of that game thus far, are all so much better and far more satisfying on revisits. 2 never improves or gets worse on repeat playthroughs. Every time I play it, I feel the same as when I first did, but we'll get to that when we actually talk about that game. Later Pikmin games introduced a lot of Pikmin. The amount of options you get in Pikmin 4 is almost overwhelming, but this first game limits it to the basics: reds, yellows, and blues. 2 of them are useful, and 1 of them is yellow. They're fairly useful in 2 onward, but here they don't have much to them. They're lighter than the other 2, so you can throw them to higher areas, but there are only a couple of ship parts that they're useful for. So for the most part, they're just the Pikmin that can carry bomb rocks. Blue Pikmin are able to breathe underwater, which opens up all of the areas to a pretty significant extent. It no longer acts as an obstacle once you get them. Red Pikmin are strong fighters and are immune to fire, making them incredibly valuable, especially in the Forest Naval. Sadly, they get the opposite treatment of the yellow Pikmin in later games, though they never stoop down to being quite as useless. I like to bring them with me in later games anyway, because I usually end up with more of them than any other variant. Anyway, this trio of Pikmin is a fairly solid collection, even if the yellows are mostly there for the aesthetics. One thing I really can't stand with this game is switching between the different Pikmin types. In the later 2 entries, you can use the shoulder buttons to switch between all the different members of your party, but in the first game, it's basically impossible to select the Pikmin that you actually want to use. You get this one little circle in the bottom HUD to tell you what kind of Pikmin you're about to chuck, but that's about it. The only way to ensure that you'll get the Pikmin you want to throw is to dismiss them and then select only that specific Pikmin. And boy do they sure love to not separate properly. And heaven forbid that you dismiss them near an enemy or grass or whatever, because they will immediately go and engage with that regardless. For a game all about time management, it's really frustrating how much time is wasted trying to get a specific Pikmin for a task. Pikmin behavior in general can be a little irksome, like when they just trip for no reason brawl style, or whenever they come across grass that contains nectar, or these stupid beetles that distract them. Whistling to them in these instances takes multiple attempts because they're so distracted. I do think this is a charming benefit of the series though. I find that I rarely, if ever, yell at the game or scream when something frustrating and stupid happens. It's always directed at the Pikmin themselves, even in the games where their AI is more competent. The developers do a fantastic job of making the Pikmin feel like real creatures across the whole series, and these quirks, no matter how obnoxious, play a big part in that. Another interesting thing from the Pikmin 4 Ask the Developer interview was learning that the bulk of the area design was done in about 4 months, since they only had one area specifically made for the E3 demo. If this doesn't prove that Nintendo is the master of level design, seeing that these 5 areas were made in such a short amount of time, I don't know what will. Sure, they aren't the most complex or intricately designed areas, but they still manage to be pretty fun to go through, and each offers a unique challenge. The impact site is a pretty good tutorial for the game, showing you the core appeal in these first few minutes. You pluck your first Pikmin and learn about carrying objects, and a bit about combat with the pellets as you slowly gather an army before you achieve your first ship part. Later entries do a lot more with their tutorial areas, but I think that what's here is fine enough. After you get the 2 ship parts from here, it's still worth a revisit since it's by far the best area in the game for increasing your Pikmin count, with these pearls that give you 50 Pikmin apiece, on top of the many pellets that you can find throughout. The Forest of Hope is the first proper area in the game, a wide open space with easier hazards and enemies than what's found later in the game. You learn about bridges, that Pikmin will drown in the water, and bramble walls you need your squad to eliminate as soon as possible. This one part taunts you for a while because you can clearly view it from across the water, but without any blues, there isn't any way to get it in the way that the developers intended. While you can get the part earlier than intended, I never want to attempt it because I value my beautiful Pikmin too much. With how close the parts are together in this area, it encourages two different playstyles. One where you focus on building your Pikmin forces and play it safe with one part a day, or the speedrun strategy where you multitask. I find that I often go for one a day because this game is a lot harder to multitask in compared to its sequels, with the multiple captains in 2 and 3 and Ochi in 4. Diving into teams to achieve different goals simultaneously is a really satisfying and rewarding process compared to the first game with just Olimar. The Forest Navel is the best area in the game, despite being the ugliest part of the game. The parts are far more spread out compared to the previous area, and yet this is the only area where I consistently gather multiple parts, as it's at that perfect middle ground of having plenty of Pikmin and not having too many deadly hazards. Sure, there's fire, but since Res are resistant to fire, as long as you properly plan out your routes, you don't have to worry about it. There are bread bugs that will steal stuff that you want, particularly a ship part, so you need to make sure you have enough Pikmin to overpower to retrieve it. It uses the yellow Pikmin for a couple of things, so that's pretty epic. Navigating through here is satisfying in a way that none of the other areas are, and the different segments that make it up are also distinct and memorable. The beach, the water, the narrow path, the pit with a puff stool, the beady longlegs arena, and the starting area with the dolphin. Shame that it's so darn ugly. The distant spring is the most dangerous area in the game. Sure, Emperor Bullblax is the most dangerous enemy that most people will face, but outside of him, there isn't too much deadly stuff in the final trial. Despite the serene atmosphere, this area doesn't pull its punches. A lot of it is water. It features the most difficult non-boss enemies in the game, including the Wollywogs, and they're the most obnoxious creature in the game to fight, and I hate them. Some of the more obnoxious parts are found here, especially this stupid one that's found up on these tiny thin ramps, which of course they expect you to get up, despite the fact that Pikmin already struggle getting up reasonably sized ramps. Most of the parts are fun to retrieve though. I particularly like this little puzzle where you have to get yellow Pikmin to this part through the water by using the candy pop buds. Later entries, specifically 2 and 4, would use the candy pop buds a lot better. Here, there's no real point to them outside of this one moment because building up your forces is as easy as killing an enemy or taking down a pellet posy. It also features something really special on days 1 through 15. The final trial is what the name suggests it is, a final trial to test your Pikmin skills. There's a fire path that you need to guide your red Pikmin through from below to push a box out of the way, a bridge that you need your blue Pikmin to build since it's on the other side of a body of water, and there are bomb rocks that you need your yellow Pikmin to carry since they're needed to destroy the walls that are in the way. Getting through this area as fast as possible is probably the most satisfying moment in the game. Even though what you have to do next is kind of obvious, doing so in an efficient manner is where the real challenge lies. It's not quite as fun as the Forest Navel, but it's a close second for my favorite area in the game. Pikmin's approach to bosses, for the most part, has been to make them bigger enemies, with the exception of the final boss and all of Pikmin 3's offerings. As such, what even counts as a boss most of the time is kind of tricky. This is to say that if you disagree with what I call a boss, then I fall under this blanket statement to prevent your criticism of me. Armored cannon beetles are always a highlight, with you having to wait for it to start the windup for its attack to throw Pikmin at its air sucky in thing, before quickly swinging to their newly exposed weak point and throwing as many Pikmin as possible there before it closes back up. Oh, I'm lightheaded, jeez Louise. While not difficult, it's fun to take down. Not sure if this will be an unpopular opinion, but I do not care for the burrowing Snagret. It's a bird, and therefore I like it on a design principle, but the fight itself isn't that engaging. I do like how it pecks at the ground and gobbles the Pikmin up like it's nothing. It's uniquely horrifying compared to what you'll likely have seen before that. I just wish there was more to it than that, mechanically speaking. The presentation is the only real standout here since you just have to throw Pikmin at it when it's out of the ground, and swarm it whenever it pokes its head out before fully revealing itself. I guess there are 3, which would provide a decent challenge, but you can very easily ignore the 2 that don't have the Geiger counter, since there's no penalty for only killing 1 or a high enough reward for taking out all 3. The puff stool is this one big mushroom thing that you have to chase down to flip it over and destroy it. What makes it stand out is its attack that converts the Pikmin to evil Pikmin, just like that one creepy mushroom that hijacks ants. And since the Pikmin have a lot of ant-like qualities, I think it's pretty neat that they introduce an enemy like that. I just wish that it was used again before 4, and even then its attack isn't quite the same as it is here. Beady Longlegs is notable for being a yellow Pikmin boss, since its only weak point is its central body, which its impervious legs sprout out of. They'll want to attack its feet, which doesn't do anything, and managing them all to attack where you want them to while also keeping them from being within stomping radius makes for a consistently engaging boss, from beginning to end. It's also fairly unique from any other enemy in the game since it feels more mechanical than biological. Its feet look like the ends of a trumpet. It's got 2 distinct ball joints on each leg, all connected to another big ball, where it's impossible to tell where it's seeing from. It's neat. Gulix is a water-based boss, being made up of these 2 spheres, the back one being its primary attack point. It's not difficult. I honestly don't even know if it can kill Pikmin in any way other than by proxy of being water. Its most standout trait is that it's something that you can easily miss since it's an optional boss in the impact site, meaning that I almost never see it, and every time I go back to replenish Pikmin supplies or whatever, I'm greeted with its presence. It's fine, but nothing special. Definitely not losing sleep over the fact that it's not been brought back for future entries. This next one isn't a boss, but it's the best spot for it. I've never personally considered the Mamuta to be an enemy since it doesn't kill the Pikmin, but replants them as flower Pikmin, acting as a far less antagonistic figure. I've always viewed it as either planting them to protect them, or more likely, it just thinks that the flowers that Pikmin sprout are pretty, and it wants to enjoy the view around its homeland. Both are plausible if you open your heart to the possibilities. While it does attack you, it's only when Olimar gets too close or starts plucking the Pikmin, which would make sense as it could view him as a predator. They're really neat, and I love their design and inclusion in every game. Ever since my first playthrough, I've always kind of hated Emperor Bullblacks. The reason being that the way they want you to beat him is really obnoxious. Basically, you have to take your yellow Pikmin and use them to throw bomb rocks into his mouth. It is way too finicky though, because there are a ton of instances where they'll miss, or they won't throw it at the right time, they'll blow themselves up like the idiot plant creatures that they are, and if they get eaten while carrying a bomb, you'll still be stunned, but not nearly for as long. I get what they're going for, using it as a way to discourage you from letting your Pikmin die, but at the same time, a bomb blast is a bomb blast regardless of whether someone is holding onto it. It should still have the same effect. This time around, I said screw it and just brought 100 red Pikmin into the fight and see if that would do anything. This simple change turned him from my least favorite boss in the game to my absolute favorite, and it's now something that I look forward to replaying on every subsequent visit to this game. No longer are you waiting for him to open his mouth with a bomb since he can throw your Pikmin onto his cheeks at any point. It's all about determining when the best time to throw them is, which means that it feels like you have more control over the pacing of the fight. When he shakes your Pikmin off, they aren't instantly killed, so it still feels fair. It takes longer than just shoving a bunch of bombs in front of him, but while it isn't as easy as that strategy, it is the most fun way I've found of beating him. Sometimes engaging in the most optimal strategy or whatever, or the way that the developers intended you to fight him isn't that fun, and it sucks a lot of the enjoyment out of it. The way I did it on this playthrough costs a lot of Pikmin, but I don't care because it's something that makes the experience more enjoyable. And then there's the most horrifying thing in the entire series. If you visit the distant spring on or before day 15, then you'll find this egg. When it hatches, a demon comes to wreak havoc on the land, known as a Smoky Prog. This abomination is the only boss in the game that actively sets out to destroy unplugged Pikmin, and the start of the fight is where it's at its scariest since it ignores everything other than these specific Pikmin. Surrounding it is gloom, which is an instant kill hazard. The only area you can attack is its face, and as you might expect, its mouth is on its face, meaning if you aren't extremely careful, then it can also just eat your Pikmin. It doesn't even get a distinct boss theme or anything, which makes it feel even more out of place. When defeated, it slinks back to hell from whence it came, which you can tell based on the flames. I talk about it as much as Emperor Bullblacks, but I'm too much of a coward who loves my beloved plant children too much to risk their lives for this. The reward you get is 100 Pikmin from the pearl it drops, which is a nice apology gift from the developers. I don't have too much to say about the first Pikmin. Despite its jank, it remains an endlessly replayable, endlessly satisfying, endlessly charming experience that never ceases to put a slight grin on my face. It has its own strengths compared to the other entries, like the strict time limit that no other game even tries to emulate. It feels specifically designed to be replayed in a way that later entries don't, especially 4. These aren't weaknesses of those later 3 games, just things that help 1 to stand out even after all of these entries, even with its control and Pikmin AI issues. This is hands down my favorite GameCube game, as well as a wonderful start to a wonderful series.